All right, let's go ahead and get started. So it's 1 o'clock as promised. This Hangout on Air is going to be an introduction of some exciting work that's coming out of Amplified IT. My name is Andrew Stillman. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Amplified IT. And I started at Amplified IT in February, and it was an exciting time for me. Big transition career-wise into a role where a lot of kind of new product development work, building on some of my previous work, is going to be able to take place. So really excited to share some of the work we've done in just a few short months. I'm going to be doing the majority of the talking, but joining me, we have a few members of our Rockstar developer team. James Peterson, who some of you may know, very active in the Google Educators community, and a skilled app scripter who's known for a couple of tools that you've put out. James, what are some of the pieces of work you've done previously that people might know you for?
I've done Page Mover, which moved pages around in a Google form, and my sadly still caged bird feeder because of the AppScript limitations of 1 execution per hour.
That's right. You did something else with calendar events as well, as I recall, that was very useful to folks. So yeah, James, like myself, is a former educator, math teacher, and outdoorsman. And other than that, we now both are members of the same team. Also joining us, we have Jasmine, who is based out of Virginia. She's one of our Rockstar recent grads from a CS program down in Virginia, and she's rapidly building a set of very professional engineering skills. And likewise, Kayla fits very much the same description, joining us today. And then we have someone by the name of Peter Lee, who is based out of Scotland, and he's a family man, and it's dinner time right now over there, so he's unable to join. He may pop in at some point, but those are the faces of our development team. And just to be clear, Amplified IT is a services company that's been around for about 7 years and primarily focused on helping schools get the most out of the Google Apps platform through a set of migration services, services that allow schools to audit their domain settings, and the ability for schools to buy consulting hours where they can interface with someone with a great deal of expertise to help them configure and set up their Google Apps environment to maximize its return. So Amplified Labs is the product division of Amplified IT, so a brand new effort where we're focusing, in addition to services, on creating our own tools. And the reason for the existence of a lot of our tools and the focus around our tools is, in our experience working with schools, we recognize that schools are highly resource and time constrained, and they have a tremendous amount of complexity. And so given the number of different processes that have to be managed inside of a school in order to be effective, there's a huge opportunity for systems improvement. And it turns out that it's not just in the classroom that set of systems can be improved. They're all across everything from the district back office to the school's front office to the way a teacher interfaces with student documents. So we believe there's a tremendous amount to be gained in building utilities, small, in some cases, single-purpose apps that really focus on helping a school improve its processes. So let me jump to screen share real quick. And here's a picture of what a classic school might look like, where you have a ton of stuff happening, and the adults, in some ways, can't keep up with everything that's happening. And part of why we think Google Apps is so revolutionary for schools is that it allows us to start bringing more and more of those kinds of systems into a 21st century collaborative platform. And that with the tools we're building, we can leverage automation to really change the way folks work in schools, to make schools more effective. To give a sense of some of my personal history and the history of the kind of tools I'm talking about, we're talking about what used to be called AppScript. I mean, it still is called AppScript as a development language, but Google Scripts is what they used to be called, and you could install them from a gallery, and you could actually see the source code. So a lot of these goofy icons that you see here going back as far back as 2012 with Flubaroo and Formule and Autocrat, those used to be attached to the actual spreadsheets that you installed them on. So most of these were installed in Google Sheets. And that way of distributing source code to users had a number of problems, and Google recognized this. One was that if something broke in Google's APIs, or if a developer wanted to push upgrades, there was actually no way for end users to get those upgrades short of actually copying and pasting the new code into their spreadsheets. And so this was a really messy system, and Google realized that the world had kind of outgrown it. And so in early 2014, they launched something called add-ons. Add-ons are basically just Google scripts for the masses, and they're packaged up and they're distributed in what looks like the Chrome Web Store. You can get them through the add-ons menu in Google Sheets, Google Docs, and Google Forms presently. The nice thing about add-ons is that every user is running off of the same underlying code. So that developer, when they push an update, impacts all users with that update, which is both good, and it's also turns out a great deal of responsibility. So at the time, I was working at a place called New Visions for Public Schools, and increasingly I was able to define my job function there around being able to maintain some of these tools. Although it was still very much below a 20% project, it was something that was kind of in the margins of my workday. And so what started to happen is these tools grew and grew in popularity, and other folks joined the fray. So folks like Ollie Trussell in England wrote a tool called Essay Metrics. There's a guy named John McGowan, who some of you may know, who wrote GMath. Bjorn Berendt, who I collaborated with on a tool called G-Class Folders, has come out with a number of great tools. All of these tools, for the most part, have been free. Which means that you're talking about, for the most part, working educators. All the folks I just named are classroom educators, with the exception of myself. I was working in a school reform organization. Larger and larger bodies of users on these tools, and the consequences for not having truly professional engineering on them started to grow. And we saw that in some cases updates would get pushed and you'd have very, very large numbers of users negatively impacted. The maintenance load started to grow. So we started to see folks like Roman Vayard, who's very, very well known for Awesome Table and Yet Another Mail Merge, deciding that it was time for AppScript to grow up. It was time for there to be a paid model where the support demands of 60 to 100,000 monthly active users could actually be met, and there could be a financial reward that was adequate to incentivize developers. So he really pioneered with Yet Another Mail Merge a model where users could pay for a premium version of the add-on, and the revenue generated from that would be sufficient to staff a team of engineers. And so right around that time, Amplified IT approached me and proposed that we pursue a similar model. And so I decided to make the jump. And what you should know is that a lot of the tools that I previously worked on are still actively maintained by the team that I developed at New Visions for Public Schools. So for those of you that still do depend heavily on Autocrat or Formule or CopyDown or some of these other add-ons, they are presently maintained by New Visions for Public Schools. They're not maintained by me. I've had to tell a lot of people that. It's a bittersweet feeling to have to give up projects, but fortunately New Visions seems to be interested in continuing their support. We, however, are committed to a model where we can staff an increasingly sophisticated engineering team, and the folks you see on the call today are just the beginning. My personal view is that the model we had doesn't sufficiently incentivize folks who are actually responsible for tens to hundreds of thousands of users. So there needs to be a different model. And so we're interested in pioneering that model alongside some of the other folks that have already started that work. I think the other reason I think this is really important is educators and schools deserve high quality support. And so we intend to have a well-staffed help desk and a guarantee of quick turnaround on support. And then finally, one of our key objectives is to make sure that schools can trust the folks behind the apps. It's not enough if you're putting student grades or student health information into sheets and you're being careful with those to then have folks willy-nilly installing add-ons that the school districts don't necessarily understand who's behind them, and they're not adequately clear privacy and terms of service documents supporting those tools. So one of our intentions is to kind of tame the wilderness and create an ecosystem of tools that districts can really trust. And that's why I think it's really fantastic news that Amplify IT was willing to throw in and resource this strategy. So that's the evolution of things in the last few months. Let's jump into a few tools that we've been working on. And I'm going to start with a tool called GroupGator. And if you're interested, all of these tools can be had at our website, labs.amplifiedit.com. They all do have, at minimum, a free version. So if you go to the tools section of the site and you were to click on GroupGator, for example, and I'll go ahead and share this resource with the viewers. We've used this feature before. Hopefully it works. And so what you'll see on this marketing page is just some overview information, and then if you can continue scrolling, there's purchasing information. And you'll see a free version that you can install, and this will allow you to use the full version of the app for up to 5 domain groups in this case, and we'll see what that means in a second. So that's going to be true of the next 3 tools that I showcase. So what is GroupGator? GroupGator is a response to a set of problems that we find schools over and over are facing with trying to use Google Apps domain groups in more sophisticated ways. So Google domain groups are incredibly powerful, right? They're listservs, but they're like listservs on steroids. They're not just email. They're collaboration containers. They're privacy containers. You can share a Google site, for example, with just your staff. And suddenly all the links and docs and everything else that you're embedding on that Google site, you can have a reasonable assurance will never be accessed by students. And so Google Groups can be a tremendously powerful container for allowing teams to collaborate more effectively in schools. And these are actually ways of working that schools have never experienced before. So admin and teacher teams, your math department, your ELA department, etc., all could have domain groups. They're also incredibly powerful communication instruments. So think how much time is spent on morning announcements in schools. Well, imagine you had targeted grade level announcements that you could put out by grade level. The juniors have a college planning meeting, etc., right? A lot of schools we find are not fully utilizing groups for things like that. So whether it's grade level sports teams, student clubs, or particularly at the elementary level, class listservs, class newsletters. There's a ton of use cases for Google Groups that are not adequately leveraged right now, and we find that the reason that they're not adequately leveraged is that it's too hard to delegate group management. So GroupGator was designed to make the delegation of Google Groups more straightforward. And I didn't mean to stop sharing my screen there. And some of you might ask, well, isn't there currently a way to manage group delegation? And the answer is yes. Through Google Groups for Business, there is a way through creating ownership to allow someone to maintain the membership of a group. And that person, that someone, doesn't have to be a super admin. So there is a mechanism right now through the native Google platform to go ahead and delegate groups. The challenge with that is that a couple things. The interface is not great. Adding members and maintaining members takes place through a fairly clunky user interface. But I think even more important, there is kind of a Pandora's box of settings and permissions that owners end up having control over. And some of these could be absolutely devastating if they were configured wrong. So take, for example, a group like a staff group where sensitive student information is being shared. If somebody accidentally were to make it possible for the public to join that group, and again, it's just one setting away, you're in a position where a lot of damage could happen around student data. So our view is that this process of delegating groups currently in Google's product suite is broken for schools. It's not sufficiently robust. So GroupGator attempts to solve some of those problems by approaching the challenge with a new kind of role. So instead of making someone an owner of a group, you simply make them a delegated manager. A delegated manager, as you'll see in a second, has one right in the group and one right only, and that is the right to add and remove members. They can't do anything else. And the way you delegate groups in GroupGator is through an admin interface. Okay, so it gets installed through the Google Apps Marketplace by a super admin. It's not an app that can be installed by regular end users. And once it's installed and configured, you'll see it presents the admin with an interface where they can grab any group on their domain. So take, for example, this grade 3 math group and delegate it to any user of their choosing. So let's say I'm going to delegate it to a user called Andrew Dev. And again, this user doesn't have to be a member even of the group that I'm delegating. So this could be a school secretary, right? A lot of the schools that we've worked with typically will have someone in the front office of a given school in the district whose job it is to maintain all the staff lists. So under Google's management scenario, you couldn't have a secretary who wasn't also a member of every group that you put them in. Under this scenario, you can delegate to anyone, and they don't have to be members of the group. So I can send a notification, and an email will go out to that user letting them know that they've been delegated the group with a link to the second part of the tool, which is not the admin interface, but the end user interface. So if I go real quick to a non-admin account, pull this up, you will see this sidebar, which is an add-on for Google Sheets. And so the non-admin user simply opens GroupGator from the add-ons menu. And just moving this up. And as you'll see, there's a few different tabs in this sidebar. So what you'll notice is that the user has the ability to add all the different groups that they have been made a delegated manager for. So there's that grade 3 math group that I just delegated. I can say manage this group in the sheet, and that group will get a dedicated tab in the workbook loaded up with its current membership. And you'll see the sync status column tells you when the group member was last downloaded from the domain. What you'll see in the other tabs is that the delegated manager can now add and remove members. So one of the nice things it has is a directory. So let's say I wanted to add James to this group. You can see I can do a search. I'm being shown not just the email address, but also the org unit of that user. So that's going to help me avoid making mistakes when kids and students maybe have the same names. And again, I'm managing this group right now from an account that is neither an admin, an owner, or even a member of the group, right? It's a very, very different kind of a delegation scenario from what Google offers. So you'll see James was just added to this group. What you'll see over here is I can run bulk updates. So let's say I wanted to grab a list of email addresses that I'd been collecting in a spreadsheet, put it in my clipboard, drop it into these tabs, drop it into these cells, and I can go ahead and select the group that I want to update. And you'll see it's going to provide me a preview of all the changes it's about to make. There you go. So you can see it's about to add 3 members to the group. I go ahead and click apply. Those changes get synced up, and if you were to go look in the admin panel at the membership of this group, you'd see all those members had just been added. So really simple experience for the delegated manager. We tried to make this as straightforward as possible for someone like a school secretary. Our hope is that that type of user is already very comfortable in Google Sheets. And so this is just one more Google Sheet where they can maintain their staff directories, all the different team groups. And the one last thing I would say is that because Google Sheets itself is shareable, this is the kind of thing where the spreadsheet itself can become a directory. And so you could, if you want, in your staff intranet site, for example, drop a link to this spreadsheet in or embed this spreadsheet, and everyone on the staff will have a list of who's in which groups on the domain. So that's about it for GroupGator. Let's jump back into the slide deck. Any questions that have surfaced in the Q&A around GroupGator? I guess not. Let me.
There was just a question about where they can see the links that you're sharing.
Oh, I thought I used the showcase feature. So I don't know how the showcase feature works. I dropped a link into the showcase feature. I don't know, maybe somebody else can solve that. I'm not sure. There's supposed to be a showcase feature on the Hangout on Air event. All I did was share the link to the Amplified Labs site and specifically the tools section of the site. So this deck, unfortunately, at this point, we can't share. It has some things in it that we're willing to share on a Hangout, but not yet publicly. So at this point, you can assume anything that's on this slide deck, you're going to have to just work with the website for now. All right, let's jump back in. So the next tool I want to look at was actually written by James Peterson primarily. So nice job, James. That last one, GroupGator, was my valiant effort to stay relevant, and this next one, James is rapidly eclipsing me as a developer. So you'll see his interface is gorgeous, of course. Event-o-matic. So for those of you that are familiar with tools like Formule and Autocrat, which may ring a bell, these are merge tools. They're tools that function to take a row of spreadsheet data and turn it into a thing. And in this case, the thing that event-o-matic creates is a calendar event. So why would we want to do such a thing? Tons of different use cases in schools where large numbers of events are involved, or even more, I think, cleverly, cases where a Google form submission could serve as the front-end data source for the creation of an event. So just like some of those other merge tools that I mentioned, event-o-matic features a form trigger, which means that as data comes into the Google Sheet from the Google form, an automated process will run that evaluates that row of data and creates an event. And what's exciting about that is that triggered process can run as the person who set up event-o-matic, not as the person who submitted the form. And that little twist creates tremendous power, because what it means is you can now have people making reservations on a calendar, and you can force them to do it through a form without making the calendar editable to them. So it's very exciting, and the kinds of use cases that you could imagine are event-driven approvals, right? So we'll talk about one in a second where folks are reserving something like an auditorium calendar. Cases where you have large numbers of events. So let's just take a few. Let's imagine I have staff birthdays, and I want to create a calendar for the whole staff to be able to know when everyone else's birthday is. So you can see I've prepped some data here. One row per birthday, and I've got the date already slotted in, and this is the date for this school year. I've got event-o-matic already installed as an add-on. And you'll see in the setup a really nice stepper. This approach kind of guiding you through each of the requirements of the add-on. So it's asking you to select a calendar. I've got a staff birthdays calendar. This is a secondary calendar in my Google Calendars list. If I go here, you can see this is a calendar that I have ownership/editing rights on. So any calendar I can edit. So here's staff birthdays. Let's zoom out on that. So you can see right now there are no staff birthdays on that calendar. And this might be a calendar that I share with the staff group on my domain, right? And I would share it in a way that is view only, because I don't want them going in and editing each other's birthdays. And then I'm being asked what sheet contains the merge data. In this case, it's a tab called Staff Birthdays. There are some advanced features which I won't get into that do allow you to actually merge to multiple calendars. And you'll see here I can map the fields in my spreadsheet to the expected fields in a calendar event. So in this case, I'm just going to put the full name of the teacher as the event. I'm not going to do a description, but I could. I'm going to leave the guest list blank. But what it means is that if I had a cell in the column in the spreadsheet that contained email addresses, I could have those folks invited as guests to the calendar events that are created. Likewise with location, I'm going to leave that one blank for now. And then this is asking me what field contains the start and end dates of the event. So in this case, I'm going to choose birthday date this school year, and I'm going to go ahead and make these as full day events, because it's not just your birthday, it's your birthday all day, right? It's a full day event. But as you can see, there's lots of options here. And we're not going to use any of these for this demo, but you'll see here's where we could merge on form submit, and then in a second we'll make use of this condition in a different example. So let's go ahead and preview these events. So the nice thing about this, when it's run manually, it gives you this gorgeous preview of everything it's about to do before it does it. And so you can see each event gets its own little tab, and I can make sure everything's legit. And then if I click that checkbox, it should now be creating events. So you can see in the background a bunch of things happening in the spreadsheet. And if I go into this calendar and hit refresh, let's see, I need to find a month that actually has birthdays. So these start, look at that. Julie Tanner has a birthday in September. There's a few others in orange. So there you have it. That's how you would mass create events. Another great example would be your sports coaches, where they have a known set of practice and game dates. Hugely useful there. You're trying to create a shared calendar that your athletes can access and their parents can access, perhaps on a public website. This would allow the mass creation of those events very, very easily. To get into kind of more interesting ones, let's look at a few systems that could involve calendar event creation or conditional event creation. So another example that I think schools run into a lot is shared spaces, where there needs to be some kind of approval step. So these kinds of workflows can be set up with event-o-matic by creating an approval flag, taking in the requests via Google form, and then having someone in the in-between stage whose job it is to review the inbound submissions. So just to pull that up for a second, here's an example of what that spreadsheet might look like. And what you'll see is I've actually got more than event-o-matic running right now. I've got another add-on I wrote while I was at New Visions called CopyDown, and one called Formule. We're not going to go into these now, but CopyDown essentially will bring the formatting and any formulas down to the next form submission row. So this sheet where you see timestamp and username, this is a form submission sheet. And as these come in, they come in with a pending status. And CopyDown takes care of that. And the other thing they do when they come in is an email gets kicked out confirming that the request was received and CCing someone at a reservations email address. So a notification goes out, and let's imagine a school secretary or an administrator whose job it is to receive those. They would come in, they would review the requests, and they would either set them to approved or declined. And what you'll see in event-o-matic is that it's set up to merge on a condition. So one of the other nice features here is I can make it so that only rows that meet a condition end up creating calendar events. So you'll see here I've said approval status must be a value of approved, and if I go and I try to preview these events, we should see that only one of those two new submissions is actually going to be created in the calendar. So there it is. The Step Squad Boombastic Battle of the Batons is going to get an event. And just so you have a sense, this is what the form for that system would look like. And we're actually going to make this available as a template following the Hangout on Air. So this will be something that you could put your hands on and get as a starter form. But the idea is that this is the kind of thing you would link from your staff intranet site, and you would encourage your staff to reserve all of the auditorium dates this way. So just an example of how event-o-matic could be used. Another real quick one, which I won't go into great depth on, this would be a field trip approvals and permission slip system. So you could imagine a very similar scenario where a school administrator really needs to approve those field trips before they get put on the calendar. And so the setup would be very, very similar. Submissions would come in, they would start with a pending status, an approval would take place or a rejection would take place, and then subsequent follow-up emails would be sent. The difference here is that I've also integrated the Autocrat add-on, which again is still maintained by New Visions. This would be used to generate the actual field trip permission slip document. So in addition to having a condition set for the calendar event creation, you could set Autocrat up, let's say, to run on an hourly trigger and generate the permission slip document, share it with the teacher, and then as part of the approval confirmation for the teacher, not only are they getting invited to the calendar event that represents their field trip, right? Their field trip is being put on a shared field trips calendar. So it's transparent, the whole school can see when the different field trips are happening. But they're also getting shared on a document that they can then run off photocopies from. That is the school's standard permission slip document. So these are just the kind of pipe dreams and realities that you can weave when you start plugging together lots of different add-ons in combination. And one of the starring add-ons in both of these examples is of course event-o-matic. So James, how did I do? Is there anything you would add about the tool that I've
No, I
mentioned?
think it's. I think you've given a very clear picture of what it is and how it works. We do have a couple of questions about it. The first one is, any way to update already created events using event-o-matic? So the answer to that is that currently what you will need to do is go into the calendar and manage the changes that way. The reason that we don't want to overwrite existing events with event-o-matic is that we can run into all sorts of sync issues. So if you take a look at the sheet, every event that gets created has a hyperlink to it directly from the sheet, so you can go right into that event and make any changes that you need. The second question that we had was, will event-o-matic avoid duplicate events by any condition? For example, date, time, conflicts, room locations, and so on. Right now, event-o-matic is set up to completely trust the user to create events. So it's different from a resource calendar, which will automatically reject duplicates. Instead, what it will do is it will ask you to go through and make sure that everything's set up right, and it will book it whether it's got a conflict or not. So probably the best way to avoid conditions where there are conflicts would just be to use the conditional event creation.
Right, and so in theory, you could create spreadsheet formulas that would evaluate for conflicts. That's obviously going to be a more advanced skill set, right? It's going to require some pretty fancy footwork in spreadsheet formulas, but those are both, I mean, certainly excellent suggestions and things we've thought about. They were not something we were ready to put into the kind of MVP version, but yeah, we'll certainly continue chewing on how to best handle those scenarios. Anything else?
I think that's about it.
Great. Let's move on to the next one that's currently released. So again, the two you just saw, GroupGator and event-o-matic, both have a free version. I believe the free version of event-o-matic will limit you to 25 events per day. So that's actually a pretty high limit for a lot of the use cases we just talked about. So the kind of approvals and form-driven processes that I was just mentioning are unlikely to exceed that 25 limit. So I feel like if you want to get a taste and start relying on this tool, you could do so without having to pay anything right now. And then as you become a power user, then maybe it's time to contribute and buy a license. So that's really our model is we want teachers and low-level kind of day-to-day users to have the ability to get some usefulness out of the tools without having to pay, and to really experience the full value of the tool before they have to decide to pay. So Local Hero, let's jump in. This is a very different kind of app. So everything we've talked about thus far has been built in AppScript as an add-on. Local Hero is actually a Chrome app. So I'm going to drag the window in here. And what you'll see is what looks like a native Mac app. And this is a way of packaging applications that Google has provided where the app actually runs locally. Resources that are available. And the reason we did this is it turns out there's a lot of power in being able to access local files and local computing resources. What Local Hero attempts to do is bridge the local network with the cloud. So essentially, in our experience, we find that a lot of school districts have locally hosted or vendor-hosted information systems, either employee information systems or student information systems, and they already, in many cases, have the skill set to write queries against those information systems. So typically that's done in SQL, search query language, and those queries will bring typically CSV files down to a local server environment where some kind of a local process is being run against them. Right? So this is often used with GAM to do account provisioning, or it's used with batch processing for third-party systems like your lunch system or your busing system. There's a lot of these cases where districts are pulling data down to do things with them, and the files live in a local environment. And that scenario is one that we think has the potential to unlock huge amounts of advantages once that data can be synced up to Google's cloud. So if you've been following AppScript and you understand how powerful AppScript is, for example, there's basically nothing you can't do in AppScript in any of Google's APIs. So AppScript can access every single product virtually that Google has ever created. So anything you could imagine automating off of student information system data, provided you have either an add-on or a local script that is able to do it, you could do it. The challenge is, how do you get your SIS data to stay synchronized in Google Sheets? So take student enrollment, for example. Students are constantly coming and going in a lot of districts. And let's say you want to automate a process. Maybe you want to make a contact directory available to your staff. Maybe you want to take your staff list and automate some process like a Google Drive folder being created or placed in their drive. These are dynamically changing sources of information where copying and pasting that information into a Google Sheet is simply not going to be robust enough. Local Hero attempts to solve those problems. So it's a bridge from your local desktop environment up to Google Sheets. And let's look at how that works. The way it works is, again, a nice stepper interface. And then the idea is that you would paste the destination spreadsheet ID. In this case, the spreadsheet I'm working with is here. Let's go ahead and pull that up. Just go ahead and paste the ID in there, and you'll see the ID of the spreadsheet comes from its URL. And what we have here is a spreadsheet with a hidden tab. And what you'll see is that the hidden tab is actually where I'm going to be pushing locally sourced information. So this information would be, for example, your master enrollment list, which could be easily pulled from your student information system. That local file will be replaced, let's say, every night at midnight. You set up a batch process. That locally hosted file on your network will then get synced by Local Hero up to this spreadsheet. And then what I've done in this case is I've built an awesome table. And awesome tables is something many of you may be familiar with, written by Roman Vallard, which is then hosted in a website. And so you can embed, for example, a contact directory right in your staff intranet. And so this is what you're looking at as a WordPress site that has an awesome table embedded in it. And what's beautiful about this is that any changes that are occurring in my SIS within 24 hours, I know will also show up in this directory. So this is just one example, right? This is a kind of a made-up example where I'm imagining that I want to make student home contact information easily available to staff. And Awesome Table, for example, has these really snappy filters and ways of exploring the data. Rather than hand a spreadsheet to my staff, why not hand them something like this that's actually part of their staff intranet experience? And so again, Local Hero is not producing this contact directory. What Local Hero is doing is keeping local data synced with a Google spreadsheet. So just to take it a step further, what you'll see is I define the spreadsheet ID. I pick my local file. So you'll see this file picker lets me go in and identify the location of that CSV file. And the next step is going to ask me to define my mappings. So this is allowing me to say which columns in the target sheet are going to be populated from the CSV. I'm then going to decide what action I want Local Hero to take. And I think this is one of the more exciting parts of it. So it's pretty sophisticated. It's going to let you clear and replace the destination data. It'll let you append to the destination sheet. And then I think these two are especially interesting. You can update based on a unique key match. So I could say that student ID, for example, is my match, and I could update any matching records with new information. What that's going to allow me to do potentially is actually keep information next to these records in Google Sheets. So this opens up some really interesting opportunities for not only dashboards, but collaborative spreadsheets where source data about students is being preserved next to collaborative notes being taken by staff members, for example, or status messages being written by add-ons. So I could be running reports against these records and then have the records regularly updated. And then the last option is called an upsert. It's very similar to an update, except this one, let's say new students are added to the school. This will actually go in, update existing students, and insert new students. So you can see it's fairly robust in terms of the options it allows. You can test the job, so I can actually push the data right here and then make sure that it's working the way I expect. And then finally, what this does is very similar to AppScript, except local. It sets triggers, and these are time triggers, and it's pretty robust. It's going to let you run it every hour if you have constantly changing data, or you can set it to run like a batch job at specific times of the day on specific days. So you save that job, and the free version of Local Hero right now will allow you one job, and then I believe the paid version, we plan on having it be essentially unlimited. Once you have the domain license, you can set it up on as many user accounts as you want for as many jobs as you want. So this is your way, again, to bridge SIS or Employee Information System data up into Google Sheets to then be able to do really powerful things with it. A couple of other examples, maybe more exciting than a contact directory. You could imagine live attendance data, right? So daily attendance is being taken, and maybe the SIS you're using doesn't have the right way of representing that information to your staff. Maybe you want to flag students at risk. You want to have specific actions that get undertaken by staff members. Your student information doesn't do that. So you can imagine creating a dashboard where anybody could come and see a history of attendance and lateness up to today, right? So maybe I'm a 7th period teacher and I don't know if a kid has been marked officially absent. I could come to this dashboard and see it. Another one that I recently created takes a master teacher list, and it goes and detects in that user's drive whether the folder that I want them to have under my drive is still there. So just, again, Local Hero doesn't do that part of it, but it's an example of an app script automating a process off of this dynamic staff list, which is going to be populated from my employee information system. So I like to call Local Hero kind of like the base plate for your Lego kit. So if you imagine all of your add-ons and any app script you could imagine creating being your Lego pieces, Local Hero is like a base plate where you can essentially take any data from any source information system that you can query, bring it down to a local copy, sync it up to a sheet. I'm going to go ahead and skip this slide. We have a fourth tool that we've, actually James had a big hand in producing as well. James has been a busy boy. It's called Centipede. And Centipede is actually something we're not charging any money for directly. Centipede is, let me just turn on my webcam for a second, is really just an Arduino Micro. So we wrapped a brand around this thing that already exists, basically. But we think the name is fun. So you can see it's this tiny little device. It's an open platform. If you don't know Arduino, it's incredibly popular. It's an Italian open source hardware collaborative that designs these platforms. Used by artists, it's used by makers all over the place. It's becoming increasingly a part of the maker education curriculum. But essentially, this is just a very small microprocessor, and it can have scripts installed on it. I'm going to turn my camera off and go back to screen share. And I'm just going to plug this device into a USB port on my computer, and I want you to watch what it's doing.
Andrew, we're not seeing.
We decided. Oh, sorry. I've got too many things going on. Thank you, James. So we decided that there is a really annoying and repetitive thing that a lot of our district admins, IT admins, find themselves with master's degrees doing manual and repetitive labor, and that is during the enrollment of Chromebooks. So what you'll see here is I've dropped my cursor into this slide, and my Centipede is undertaking all of the tabs, hard returns, and key presses that would be necessary to enroll a Chromebook. And as it turns out, this device costs $9. So what you're looking at is something that during the mass enrollment of Chromebooks could save you hundreds and hundreds of person hours in the process. The other thing we find is that doing the Control-Alt-E sequence of keystrokes is something that is a very, very costly error to make. So if you're not familiar, enrolling a Chromebook requires a special keystroke combination. If you're tired and annoyed at doing this over and over again, it's very easy to make this mistake and forget to put it into enrollment mode, and then you're stuck having to spend the next 20 minutes wiping that Chromebook. So this device saves you on errors. It drops your SSID and your Wi-Fi information in there correctly. It drops the username in there correctly, and it really can save hundreds and hundreds of hours. This is not something that we sell directly. So the step to get this tool would be from our website. We have a referrer link to Amazon. It's just a vendor that we've tested, and then James has put together some learning resources about how to install the sketch file. So there's a small piece of source code that you upload onto the device, and then once it's installed, you have a little 100-footed helper to help you with your Chromebook unboxing. So these are extremely popular right now. This is literally the most popular page on our website. It's taking the world by storm. Try it out, Centipede, if you're enrolling a lot of Chromebooks. The next few slides we're going to move through pretty quickly, and this is because we're talking about products that are not yet released. And for those of you that are on the Hangout on Air, you're lucky. This is a part of the Hangout we are not going to make public, so enjoy the next few minutes. This is your chance to get a sneak preview of some really interesting work that we're undertaking. So the first one we want to talk about is really exciting. It's another Chrome app, so similar to Local Hero. And I should pause, actually. Are there any Q&As that we need to get to related to anything we've gone over?
We do have one that is not tool specific, but we have a question regarding what is the best tool for auto-sharing group resources. For example, if we share a calendar with a group, that calendar will not show up until it's clicked at least once.
Auto-sharing group resources. I'm not understanding the question. Is anyone else?
I think what Bjorn is asking is when things are shared with groups, the individual users don't necessarily get it showing up in their list of calendars or in their shared with me in section in Drive.
I see. Yeah, I actually don't have an answer to that. I'm not sure.
I've been racking my brains. I can't come up with anything either.
Yeah. You can count on Bjorn to ask the stumpers.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bjorn.
He also asked, can Centipede handle restarts? It depends if it's a soft restart or a hard restart. If you go to chrome://quit, Centipede will handle that. If you're powering it off, basically if the USB port loses power, as soon as it powers on, Centipede restarts right from the beginning.
Great.
I think that's it.
All right, let's move on. So this is going to be somewhat fast and furious, but Big Sis